In other news, Labor are polishing up their second wave of industrial relations reforms as they seek to turn back the economic clock to at least the 1970s. It looks as though Labor intend to treat independent contractors, small businesses and self-employed people as though they are employees. Their sales pitch is same job, same pay. It makes for a catchy TV grab. But here's the thing. Sameness actually stifles productivity. When we take away the ability of the some 264,000 self-employed tradies, for example, to run a business their own way, set their prices and incur their costs on their own terms, work their own hours, and do things according to their own creativity, we take away the capacity for innovation. And without the ability to try and do things differently, not only do you take away the incentive for people to start a business that might one day become an employer too, we also take away the best source of innovation in the market. If you want to know why it is that the startup businesses get the edge against the established big players, it's because they're lean, flexible, and able to innovate. The big employers might have some advantages, but they're usually slow, bureaucratic, and weighed down by their own size. Labor's policy here would take away every advantage a small player has in the market. And that would make them and the aspirations they represent an endangered species. It's not just relevant to the building industry. The Minerals Council has observed that it would discourage businesses from engaging self-employed tradespeople, engineers, drivers and other professionals. The trucking industry would be affected too. So where does this land? With fewer people innovating, well, that means lower productivity in the industries that use self-employed people and contractors. It means a huge increase in compliance costs for those who decide to try and persist to make it work. And it means future generations will be, they'll put striking out on their own just in the too hard basket and instead have no option other than life as an employee. Now, that's not bad if it's what you want, but for those people who want to be their own boss or who want to start a business of their own, that's not a good thing. Now, why does Labor want that? Well, it's pretty simple. Because big employers unionise. Self-employed people in small businesses generally tell the unions to get lost because they know they do more harm than good. And that's precisely why Labor and the unions are determined to make contractors and small businesses extinct. But even for a citizen who is an employee in an unaffected industry, an unaffected role, consider this. Workforce shortages in mining and construction and lower productivity across the economy are rocket fuel for inflation. Think things are expensive now? Just wait until Labor are finished with their industrial relations reforms. So let's explore this further with Master Builders New South Wales Executive Director, Brian Seidler. Brian, thank you for your time. Can you please explain to our viewers just exactly what it would mean for self-employed tradies if they were brought under these proposed IR reforms?
Well, to put it in some context, we're now talking about 1 in 5 workers in our industry. So as you identified, there's about 260,000 individuals in our industry who work independently, who actually respond to the needs of our industry, and that's flexibility. And without flexibility, I must say that during the pandemic and during COVID-19, if we did not have the flexibility from people in the industry, we would have not been able to achieve what the economy is now, where the economy is now. And so 1 in 5 or 260,000 individuals would have no direction, and indeed I think the productivity of Australia will dramatically suffer.
So Master Builders Australia has put a submission to the Department of Workplace Relations. And it says, among other things, independent contractors should have the right to choose the hours they work, what projects they work on, and be allowed to negotiate their own fees and conditions. Now, that shouldn't be a controversial proposition, if you ask me, but given there are so many self-employed tradies in this country, it's a lot of people whose rights to be self-employed and to work as a contractor that would be eroded. What's this going to mean in practice for those people who aspire to run a business of their own, be their own boss?
Let's suggest that those individuals find themselves on a contractive employment relationship rather than an independent contracting relationship. The cost of labour will absolutely increase. There is no argument about that. We have a situation where the entrepreneurial position, the fact that the basis on which the building and construction industry has been built for some 150 years has all been on entrepreneurial and aspirational independence. And now to bring those people under a contract of employment, productivity will suffer, and the cost of labour, particularly in the residential sector, will start to increase.
It strikes me that this is repeating all of the mistakes that have been made in relation to the deeming of people who are independent contractors as employees in the occupational health and safety space. But not content with making the error in one place, they've decided to expand it. The government has said this second wave of IR reforms is set to focus on the rights of gig economy workers, but how will the definition of gig economy be drawn?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We're finding that we're on the understanding that construction and other industries that have enjoyed the individual and entrepreneurial approach would be excluded from, I guess, the classification or definition of the gig economy. But that is certainly not the case as it stands today. And we are seeking clarification, but there has been no clarification at this point.
It's pretty troubling. What's been the response from the government so far? I mean, you said you haven't heard much, but has there been a quality consultation process?
Look, the consultation paper, this is the second tranche of IR reforms, came out about 3 weeks ago, and it wasn't answered in that discussion paper. In fact, the definition of independent contractor and what it actually meant really caused us at Master Builders a lot of concern, and that has not been clarified at this point.
Okay. All of this comes right as the building and construction industry is, let's face it, struggling. There's a lot of uncertainty right now with rising interest rates, rising costs of building, and the effect that both of those things can have on the confidence of people, leading to concern about how many new starts there will be in terms of new building projects. These new changes could just compound all of those issues more. Is that your expectation?
That's certainly our expectation, that if there's no clarity in who's an employee and who's a individual contractor, there will be hesitation, absolutely, particularly for the mums and dads and in the residential sector where a lot of our independent contractors live and work. And so if suddenly they could be roped in to an exercise of that you are suddenly considered or deemed an employee. And look, your comments earlier about a unionised workforce, it's no secret that for decades the union movement has wanted to get into areas such as the residential sector, and this would be a quite easy way to do that if suddenly subcontractors or independent contractors are deemed employees.
Yeah, it's just that what troubles me is that it seems Labor would rather kill this sector as a whole in order to unionise it, rather than accept that people should be able to live according to their own terms. It's not just the construction industry that's up in arms about this. The Mineral Council of Australia has also hit out at the proposal. That's two of our biggest industries now standing together against the government here. That's a pretty powerful show of concern. What will happen if this attempt to turn back the IR clock is ultimately pushed through across both sectors?
Well, it's quite clear that we are returning with the whole IR agenda back decades to where it was in the 70s and certainly the 80s. And so the one thing you can rest assured that if this gains traction and we see the removal of independents and independent contractors across Australia, that the cost of doing business for the building and construction industry will get higher. That's one thing, that cost of labour will get higher, the cost of building homes will get higher, and of course the cost of doing business will get higher.
Well, I'm a kid who grew up around the residential building industry with parents who were one of those contracting trades. And it was for them an instrument of great aspiration. And what's troubling is that between the red tape, the onerous OH&S deeming laws in relation to contractors, and now this prospect, we're going to find trades leaving the sector in droves in a way that I think has not been well thought through. Thank you so much, Brian Seidler, for your time. Really appreciate your work on this important issue. A peak body for the construction industry has warned it will push back on the government's second wave of industrial relations reforms. Master Builders Australia says the proposed measures, quote, represent one of the most significant and real attacks on the rights of self-employed and independent contractors. So joining me live now is the Chief Executive of Master Builders Australia, Danita Warren. Danita, thanks so much for your time. What exactly are you talking about here?
The government has had a policy for quite some time that it would change independent contractors who were deemed employee-like to be forced to be an employee. There was a question mark about who that would actually apply to, but it's been very evident since the discussion paper was released 3 or 4 weeks ago, that can apply to any independent contractor. And regardless of whether they had made the decision, willingly, in their best interest, that they may well be forced to become an employee. We say that's unacceptable. People should have the freedom of choice to determine whether or not they're going to be an employee or an independent contractor, and as such is seeking that these laws should not apply to the building and construction industry.
Right, that makes sense. But do you think this is the intention of the law, or do you think these tradies are collateral damage?
Well, there's always been confusion about actually what the policy is, that there has been a reference to gig workers when this policy of employee-like is discussed. But we have asked for nearly 2 years now to clarify, is that limited to gig workers or will it cover building and construction? We've never got a straight answer from the government, and as such, this has then been established by the discussion paper that it will apply much more broadly than just gig workers. It can apply to any independent contractor, and as such, we say that the government, if they don't intend it to be building and construction, then they should specifically say that. Otherwise, we will interpret it the way we are interpreting it, and that any independent contractor will be covered if they're deemed employee-like.
Okay, so what's happened in consultations? Are you concerned about what has been said in an unofficial way? What can you tell us about the conversations that you've had?
Well, up until 3 weeks ago, we had no understanding about the extent of this law. We continued to ask for it to be clarified, and the government advised us that they would not give us any details. They would not rule out building and construction. And it's only until the discussion paper was released 3 weeks ago that it was clear to us that this would be much broader than just the purported gig workers. And as such, we've read it as that. We continue to say we need to debate the why do we need these laws. But the government has said that they will not debate the why, they will simply debate the how. And as such, we're saying that is unacceptable because we don't understand why we're included in this and why other industries that are included that should not be.
Okay, so give us an idea of what the material effect is. If this includes tradies, what is that effect going to have on them individually, but more broadly the industry?
Well, we've got about 430,000 building and construction businesses around the country. Around 260,000 of those are independent contractors. A large number of them work predominantly for the same builder, but will do some other side jobs as well. And their preference is to work for a variety of different reasons as an independent contractor as opposed to an employee. It gives them that freedom of choice. It enables them to access tax benefits and so forth. They don't want to be forced to be an employee. So we argue that the way in which the discussion paper is currently structured, it may well find that many of those independent contractors, 260,000 of them, will be forced to become an employee despite the fact that they choose not to do so now. Certainly there are issues around sham contracting, and we believe that there is concern about sham contracting. Look at those laws. Don't push people into becoming employees when they don't wish to do so.
Danita Warren, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.